So, good morning. On behalf of the chaplaincy team and the Interfaith and Belief Network at King's College Hospital HS Trust, welcome to the third day of the Interfaith and Belief Week. I'm Alfred Banya, head of chaplaincy here, and I would like to welcome you all, those who are here in person and those who are joining us online. The aim of Interfaith Week, which is a national celebration, is to improve awareness of each other's faith and belief and to strengthen relations. So in our trust, we have got diverse faiths and beliefs. In the chapel today, we've got posters depicting the various faiths and beliefs represented in our trust. So that's why this week is set aside for that. So this week, across the trust, we have a series of events throughout the week. And later on, towards the end, we will show a poster which shows you all the events and the dates. Today, we are privileged to welcome and host our friends from the Jamyang Buddhist Center, Geshe Tenzin Namdak and Venerable Konchok. They come from the Jamyang Buddhist Center, which is not far from us here. And they will share with us an understanding of Buddhism and health, and also lead us later on towards the last part of the program in a meditation. So for now, I hand you over to Venerable Konchak, who will introduce in more detail our speaker and our leader today, Geshe Tenzin Namdak, and also tell us a little bit how the afternoon is going to split up, how it's going to run. So welcome, Venerable Konchak.
Thank you, Alfred. Thank you so much to everyone who's helped organize this event and the interfaith, but especially Alfred, for all the work you do here. It's really incredible, and to see someone pioneering, bringing all the faiths together is really uplifting, I think, to be a part of a religious tradition, but to have the openness to hear from other traditions and to learn from each other. So I feel very inspired and happy to be here and to be joined with Geshe Tenzin Namdak. So at Jamyang Buddhist Center, Geshe Namdak is our resident teacher, and Geshe is kind of the title that you would receive from completing the traditional 20 years monastic study in the monastery. So Geshe Namdak's completed that 20 years of study, learning about Buddhism so that he can kind of teach people in a traditional way so that people can connect with the Buddha's teachings. But we also say that it's kind of not to convert people or not to turn people Buddhist, but just in whatever way people want to engage in the teachings, that they can find benefit wherever they come from, whatever their background. So today is going to be split up with roughly an hour-long talk, give or take, and then a 20-minute break, followed by another 40 minutes. And I think there'll be a meditation in the first session and in the second session as well, just to kind of break it up. So thank you, Geshe, for agreeing to give this talk. And thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing it.
All right, so yeah, thank you very much, and thank you especially Alfred and King's College Hospital and all the people involved in the faith for inviting me. Yeah, very honored to be here, and I think it's very important to have different forms of religions being discussed. As we know, we all are different. Yeah? We all are different, and we have different interests and different aims in life that needs to be adjusted. So that's why it's very important to have various forms of religion or forms of faith represented in society. I myself also spent about more than 2 decades in India studying Buddhist philosophy in depth, and also be involved in quite a few interfaith meetings and gatherings in India. As you know, India is also a very rich country when it comes to the different forms of faith and religion. And from a Buddhist point of view, a Buddhist perspective, then also we respect any form of faith and religion, as certain forms of faith and religion brings great benefit to society, and one faith or religion does not fit everybody, right? We cannot say that one point of faith or religion is suitable for everybody. So we know we have different people backgrounds, different interests, so we need a variety of different forms of faith, and we should respect that aspect, and not only respect, also we can learn from each other. Right? So that's a very important aspect of interfaith meetings in general, and that also prevents a lot of misunderstandings, because many conflicts in the world, as we know, and conflicts in society are based on misunderstandings of each other. So it's very important to understand each other, and that's also why in Buddhism, in the Buddhist tradition, we never really encourage to convert people. We always say you can study and practice Buddhism without becoming a Buddhist. Right? You can just research and analyze and see what fits your mind. So that's a very important aspect of Buddhism, I think, and religion in general, to be open and to question things and to let other people make their decision what they find beneficial. So in Buddhism also, we say we have kind of aspects. If you take, for example, the Holiness Dalai Lama's kind of division, so to say, of Buddhist teaching, then you can divide it into Buddhist mind science, right? So the science of the mind and its emotions, so to say, or psychology. And we have, that's one aspect, Buddhist mind science. And we have one aspect called philosophy, or the nature of reality, to discuss those aspects as well. And these two pillars of Buddhism, mind science and its philosophy, so to say, can be studied and put into practice by believer or non-believer. Yeah, so you don't have to become a Buddhist, so to say, to analyze these aspects of the Buddhist doctrine. And I think it's not only for Buddhism, but also for other forms of faith and agents forms of religion. They can bring a lot of benefit to modern society. As we know, we're struggling a lot with particular mental health in modern days. And Asian techniques can be very helpful. Yeah, it's not only the Buddhist tradition that can be helpful. Other forms of faith can offer similar kind of methodologies to understand the mind, to understand its emotions, to understand how to transform the mind, so to say, how to become a happy human being. Because if you think about why do we have a religion, why do we have a faith, right? There should be a reason for that, to have a form of faith or religion. And then you could question, what is the purpose of life? You could question, why are we here? And what is our aim in life? Yeah? So then from a Buddhist perspective, we come to a kind of very simple, basic principle that we all want happiness and don't want suffering. Yeah, we all want happiness, don't want suffering, physically and mentally. And how to accomplish those two aims in life, there are various methodologies. Right? So Buddhism is just one. Yeah? Or in Buddhism we can also, even within Buddhism, we can find various traditions and various techniques. Yeah? So that's kind of a kind of knowledge the Buddhist tradition can share with others, without for others to become a Buddhist. Yeah, also we have a Buddhist center not too far away from here called Jamyang Buddhist Center, and also there we always very clear in our presentations that we're not here to make people Buddhists. We're here to help people understand their minds. We're here to help people alleviate suffering. We're here to let people get more value in life and become a happy human being. And that's the main aim. As an example, once I was in Dharamshala in the northern part of India giving an introduction course into Buddhism. And there was people from different forms of faith in the audience. And then after there was a 10-day, quite an intense course with meditations and things like that. And then one person came up to me after the course and said, wow, he said, I really understand my own religion now much better. Thank you so much. So then I thought, okay, job is done, right? That's kind of, for us, is if people find something beneficial, if it's Buddhism or if it's another form of faith, it doesn't matter, right? If they can change their mind, become a happier human being, that's that's the aim. So we have the two aims, so to say, of wanting happiness, not wanting suffering, and then we try to look at various methodologies to do that, or various practices, so to say. So yeah, for Buddhism point of view, we have the secular or universal aspects, Buddhist mind science or psychology, and the philosophy behind it. And then we have the Buddhist practice, so to say. So for those who are really interested in going a little bit deeper and really want to, including this person sitting here, also I was a university student in the Netherlands, and I did one research for the government for 1 year, and that's a 1-year work experience. But yeah, I also noticed that there's more in life than just having a job and an income. So that's kind of brought me to a spiritual path to examine a little bit more about the meaning of life, so to say, or how can we establish more forms of sustainable happiness rather than just very temporary forms of happiness. So yeah, that brought me a little bit on the search, and that's why I decided to study a little bit more Buddhism, because for me, I found it a kind of, beneficial, but it doesn't mean it's beneficial for everybody, right? So I don't think that Buddhism is the right fit for everybody. So that should be clear. Yeah. So then we have then the secular or universal aspects of Buddhist mind science, its philosophy, and then the Buddhist practice, so to say, for those who are really interested to go a bit deeper or to go a bit more into the actual practice of it. Because I think for a believer in any form of faith or religion, if you really, get a lot of interest in that particular part, for you might be the best one, but it doesn't mean it's the best for everybody, right? So that's kind of why we in Buddhism have secular or universal aspects, as well as we have aspects of the Buddhist practice, so to say. So today, the talk, I will structure more the secular aspects of Buddhism, right? And then use a few things about how we can train the mind to achieve more happiness, right? How to train the mind in that direction. And then maybe we can do a short meditation in the both sessions, just very simplified aspects of training the mind. Because meditation doesn't mean just to sit somewhere in a cave in the mountains and very remote. You can sit anywhere. It's just meditation, what we call as we come from a Tibetan tradition. It's not that the Buddhist tradition we follow is made by the Tibetans. That's not the case. It's based on the ancient Indian tradition of Buddha Sakyamuni. And after that, we mainly follow the Sanskrit tradition of the big monastic universities like Nalanda, Vikramasila, Takshila of ancient India. And those traditions are being translated into the Tibetan language and then being preserved over many generations in Tibet. So Tibetan Buddhism is not really made by the Tibetans, so to say. It's a kind of ancient Indian tradition. Also, in the 20 years of studies we traditionally engage in, then you can see all our root texts, or the basic texts, they based on the ancient Indian masters of Nalanda. So that's kind of a very rich form of philosophy and a very rich form of the science of the mind, so to say. So yeah, that's kind of a few aspects of Tibetan or the tradition where we come from in general. And then, as I said, in Tibetan, that comes from Sanskrit, we use the word for meditation means gom, and that actually indicates or translates as habituation to a positive pattern. So meditation is actually to let your mind get accustomed to and habituate your mind to a kind of positive way of life or positive way of thinking. Yeah? We can transform the mind. We can overcome destructive emotions, so to say. Yeah? We know sometimes our mind we might not be in control of our minds. Yeah? We even might get into emotional hijacks sometimes. Yeah? But it is possible to, over time, it's possible to subdue the mind, as we say. It's possible to deal with emotions we have to deal with, and to deal with situations we have to deal with. Because many aspects of what we do physically, or when we talk, or what we think, or our ideas are always rooted in a sense of an attitude, or motivation, or an attention, or a thought. So that's that also comes from the mind. Yeah? We say that the real happiness, as you know, is not out there. That's quite clear, that the real happiness we cannot find out there. If the real happiness was out there, then the most wealthy and famous people would be the happiest people on the planet. But we know that they're not the happiest people on the planet. Yeah, so, or you can think about in the early days, my time, when we were young, so to say, that you get a good education, you get some money for a year, and you do a world trip. You travel the world. And what people do in a world trip, they go to one place, and then of course you get a bit bored, and you want to go somewhere else. Right? So you go somewhere else, it's the same thing again, and then you go somewhere else, exciting new thing, and then over a certain amount of time you get bored there as well, and you go somewhere else. So you can do that for a year, and then you come to the conclusion, wherever I go, my mind goes with me, right? So it's not, the external world is not really capable of producing happiness. That's quite clear. And if you talk with meditators, I have a few friends who live in the mountains, and I've met a few meditators in Nepal and in India who live in the mountains, and if you see their conditions, sometimes no electricity, no running water, it's very basic, extremely basic. If you walk in their rooms, there's almost nothing there. Just one cup, 1 or 2 pence to make something, and that's it. Extremely basic. But if you look at their facial expressions, you can see, or when you talk with them, you can see they're very content and very happy. And so that means if you look at the various aspects in society and those who live in remote places, in meditative kind of retreats, then you can see the happiness is from within, right? The happiness comes from within, it's not from the external world, so to say. And that's why the Buddha can be considered as a scientist, a scientist of the mind, so to say. So in Buddhism, we also like to question things. Yeah? The Buddha himself said, you should not accept what I said or what I'm saying, because I'm a famous person, people respect me. You should not, based on that, you should not, based on that, believe what I'm saying. You should examine, like you examine gold. In the early days in India, ancient India, in order to make sure that gold is pure, you break it down, or you melt it, or you rub it, in order to make sure you have an authentic, pure piece of gold. In a similar way, the Buddha said, you should analyze my teachings. You should check if it's true what I'm saying, if it makes sense, and analyze for yourself, and then only accept it. So that's a very strong aspect in Buddhism. And that's also the questioning also about our mind is very, very important. To also with the Jamyang Buddhist Center we have here close by, also we have also a project that we engage in dialogues with scientists. Yeah, it's a project called Science and Wisdom Life. And in the fields of neuroscience, in the fields of quantum mechanics, and philosophy. And it's very interesting to see that Asian traditions, like the Buddhist tradition, for example, if you talk about developments, modern developments, science, subjective forms of consciousness being now very popular and interesting, there's a lot of common ground. Right? In a similar way, if you look in the world of physics, in particular quantum mechanics, there's a lot of common ground. There's a lot of very interesting dialogues and interesting discussions happening. Yeah? So that's kind of what we, in Buddhism, always put a lot of emphasis is questioning. Yeah? So then if our aim in life is wanting happiness and not wanting suffering, then we have to look for what are the methods for to accomplishing these aims in life. That's very important. Because we know that many people in society, they might not really understand the mind, right? So then we see that people think, economic growth or fame or wealth, that's the cause for happiness, but it's not. We know it's an inner transformation. It's from within the mind, as we just talked about. So then if that's the case, then it's important to understand the mind. Yeah? And that's why it's important to understand mind science or understand the different emotions, positive or negative, and how to transform our minds. So that's in Buddhism, as I said, the Tibetan word for meditation is gom. Yeah? That means habituation to a positive pattern. So we try to understand what are the disturbances in our mind and how do I transform these disturbance aspects of the mind. And there are various techniques to do that. So today I was thinking we look at two different techniques or two different types of meditation or contemplation, if you like to call it. Yeah. So one aspect is what we call concentration meditation or placement meditation. Often we're not really concentrated in our life. Yeah, especially in modern society with the internet and the mobile phone, as you know, people, they go to bed with their mobile phone, right? It's like their partner. And sometimes they put it even under the cushion or something. So people from waking up until going to bed, they basically very much externally oriented. Yeah, we never really look often inside the mind. And we know that aspects of the external world, as we know, as we talk about the aspect of sensory perception, so to say, that which activates our senses, yeah, that is not really a cause for satisfaction. And we know that. Whatever you use externally, if it's food, if it's parties, if it's holidays, if it's drugs, it's not, the more you use it, you become happier and happier. The more you do it, you become happier and happier. If that's the case, then it's a substantial cause for happiness. But we can see that's not the case. Right? So then we think, oh, and then if happiness comes from the mind, then maybe it's within us. It's very cheap, basically. Achieving happiness, you can do very cheap. If you train your mind, then that's possible. That's what we say. In Buddhism, we talk about various types of consciousness. Yeah, we have sensory perceptions, but we also talk about mental consciousness. Yeah, a mental consciousness, for example, as we think. When we think about things, when we sit down, have a few deep breaths, and try to relax and try to abide in the peace of mind, so to say. That's all has to do with the kind of what we call mental consciousness. So the mental consciousness, the Buddha was mostly interested in. The Buddha was not that interested in sensory perceptions, so to say, because sensory perceptions is very limited. While our mental consciousness has no limits. And there's a very interesting research done and conducted by over many decades, actually, by people like Richard Davidson and others, where they measure, examine the brain activity within people who have meditated for many hours. We talk about people between 15,000 till 50,000 hours of meditation. And then the first moments they start to measure, they saw gamma waves beyond the chart. They never measured those aspects in the human brain. So that's why they call them the Olympic meditators, which is a very nice kind of term to be used, right? That people who train their minds over a long period of time, they on the record scale of producing a kind of world record in gamma waves, which is very interesting. So that means that our mental consciousness, or the potential of our mind, is beyond limits. Right? Our physical body has limitations, and our sensory perceptions have limitations, but what we can do with our mind is beyond limitations. So you can achieve a kind of a very sustainable form of inner happiness or inner well-being. Yeah, and that's what we try to accomplish. If you're Buddhist or not, we have various secular techniques as well, as we will discuss today. So as we see that we need to go inside, meaning you need to be aware of things. If you're not aware of things in your life, you're not even aware if you have happiness or suffering or what you're going to do about it. Yeah? And we know the stronger our destructive emotions are, the more we get misled by it. And we see that in society. I was involved in a lot of interfaith programs in South India, as well as social service projects. We had a project with the Central Prison, in Bangalore. So there's about 4,000 inmates, and we went there for visits and did meditations and talks with the inmates there. And our translator, who was translating in the local language of Kannada, of the state of Karnataka, he was there for already 14 years. So I thought, once, because we became good friends, and I asked him one day, why are you here? Do you like to talk about it? And then he said, sorry, he said, I killed another human being. And he said, for 10 to 15 minutes, I was not in control. I made a mistake. And you can see, that's what the mind can do. So that's kind of how destructive emotions not only disturb our mind, but also can activate in a physical or in a verbal way. Yeah? So that's why we put a lot of emphasis on morality. Yeah? Morality is a very important aspect of not harming others. Yeah? And then that's the basic principle as we see in any form of faith and religion, right? To not harm others and, where possible, to benefit others. Yeah? And then how to benefit others on the short and long term. Yeah? So that's why we have social services as well as try to let people understand their minds and develop their minds. Yeah? So we mainly today will focus on that part of developing the mind. So as we said, it's from within, yeah, because most of the time the destructive emotions they try to, or they try to control us, or as we have this emotional hijack, so to say. So we try to prevent that from happening. We try to understand our mind better, and the only way to do that is to become more aware of the things in our mind. Yeah? Because some people don't even know they're mentally suffering. And they don't even know the destructive emotions are taking over. So that's a very initial aspect of what we call awareness. You have to build it. First of all, the first step is what we call awareness building, or self-awareness, to make sure you try to see what's going on inside my mind. How is happiness and suffering coming? Because sometimes we know. We wake up from a pleasant dream, and we want to actually go back to bed and dream over the dream again because it produces some kind of pleasant feeling, and then we see a message of a person, and it's a bit annoying message, and then we get disturbed. So you can see our mind is very momentary. It's very easy to change. Yeah? So because it's easy to change, that's kind of a quality of the mind. And we try to change the mind in the positive way, or become a better human being, so to say. So that aspect of the mind's training, the first step to do that is awareness. Okay? Without really understanding the different thought patterns, the different emotions that come and go, then it's very difficult to really know how to move forward. Yeah? So the first step is awareness. Same in the problem, when you have a problem in life, in day-to-day life, whatever problem you have, if you're aware of the issues, if you have clarity about the issues, it's much easier to solve the problem. Yeah? So awareness is a very important aspect. And another aspect of awareness is that it helps you to take distance. If you take distance of an emotion, that's much more clarity and much more control. If you get involved in an emotion, or you get completely occupied by it, then there's no control, there's no clarity. And we know that when we get annoyed or we get irritated, then the mind loses this clarity to think, right? Yeah? So that's kind of what we try to prevent from happening. And the only way to do that is to first be able to look at it from a distance. And that comes to awareness building. And the awareness building we can come to if we learn how to concentrate. If you know how to concentrate, then you know how to occupy your mind with one particular aspect at a time. Yeah? Because most of the time we get distracted a lot, and that our mind just comes and goes. So if you be able to focus on something, if you have some concentration, then you know how to direct your mind when you get distracted. Yeah? So that's kind of principle meditation we can do in order to train in that concentration. And the more concentration you have, the more awareness you build, because you train your mind in focusing on one particular object. Yeah, in this case, we will choose the object of the breath. Right? If you use that as an object, then it has great benefits, because we know our emotional life is very much related with how we breathe. Yeah? So if you have a calm way of breathing, it automatically relaxes. If there's more relaxation, it's much easier to see what's happening in the mind. Yeah? It's very important. And we know that. If you one day wake up and you're quite calm and relaxed, and then you go to work, and at the end of the day you're stressed or you're tired or something came up that was not that nice, then the mind easily gets negative. And the mind easily, when you're tired or stressed, say the wrong things. That's a very common aspect, that if you lose the awareness, if you lose the quietness of the mind, then it's very easy to get disturbed and to follow that disturbance. And then you might say something you later regret. You know? So this awareness building is very essential in order to learn the mind, to learn about the mind. What are the positive states of mind and what are the negative states of mind? So we talk about destructive emotions and constructive emotions, right? So destructive emotions like anger, hatred, for example, or excessive forms of desire, yeah, they disturb our mind. Yeah. Well, practicing patience and love and kindness, for example, are positive states of mind. And that has a relationship. You know, we can see that when you get really annoyed with a situation or a person, it really disturbs the mind. It produces actually mental suffering. And it might go to the extent of even verbal abuse, or you say something wrong you later regret. Right? So that means that, things origin from our intentions, things origin from our mind. Yeah. So that's, to understand that aspect, we first have to watch the mind. We first have to build a kind of awareness, understanding what's going on. And that's, we can do that by the power of, as a concentration meditation, right? You focus on one object. In this case, we're going to do that with the breathing, yeah, with the breath. Then if you focus on the breath and you, for example, you count your breath from 1 to 10 and then start over counting, then you have an object you focus on. If you have an object you focus on, you will see. If you just start doing this kind of techniques, then your mind just goes here, goes there, right? If you think about what you're going to do after this session, or you think about what you did this morning, or what you're going to do tomorrow. So what you try to learn is to bring back your mind to this concentration. If you do that, you actually you learn to control your mind. Because whenever your mind follows negative thoughts, you decide not to follow that. You just observe it and bring it back. You know? So in that way, what you can accomplish over time is to get focused and to not follow negative thoughts, or not follow negative patterns of the mind, or to not follow destructive emotions. And that's kind of a very important technique to initially try to learn. So if you be able to do that aspect, if you try to not follow whatever comes to mind, but try to be focused, then in the near future, whenever there's negative thoughts coming up, or irritations coming up, you just observe it and you don't have to follow it. And you're in control, as we say. So that's kind of a very important aspect of the mind training. The initial awareness building and redirecting your mind, so to say. So yeah, that's kind of what we call concentration or placement meditation. You place your mind on an object, or you concentrate on an object. In this case, the counting of the breath. Yeah, then you prevent yourself from following all kind of negative thoughts, negative patterns. And we know that following of negative thoughts or negative patterns happens quite easily. Yeah. We try to understand how to control your mind, to bring your mind back. And that's possible. You know? Even, we know from things like neuroplasticity and things that we can change the mind. And it's not only for these Olympic meditators I just mentioned, but there's a lot of research proving even people with a few weeks of practice can change the brain. So that's, when we came here, it was a mobile fMRI scan truck I saw outside on the street. So, oh, that's interesting because it's very interesting to see the science behind it, that the science seems to indicate that these kind of trainings seems to work. That, as we know, the movement of mindfulness, the movement of compassion training is being well documented in the scientific world, the benefits of it. Right? So that's very clear that the science behind this is very, very solid. so to say. And the techniques are very simple. It's just a matter of habituation patterns, and that's what we have to do ourselves. So that kind of in Buddhism, we think about long-term goals, and we think about long-term kind of investment, so to say, in the mind. So that also needs quite some work. I cannot promise you that within a few hours or the 2 hours we spend together, that your life will completely transform and you become a happy human being forever or something like that. That's not going to happen, right? Even people you meet that over the months, change of the mind doesn't happen that easily. We know that, right? So that's kind of very important to know. But then over the years, people you see change. So sometimes it takes a few years, or sometimes a decade, but people change, right? So that's one of my friends used to be very irritated in traffic in the Netherlands, going back and forth to work in traffic jams, and he used to really scold the people in front. And then the person in front, when cold weather, maybe they have the windows closed, listen to some nice music, and they're just standing there, and he is just, getting really annoyed and almost biting in the steering wheel, right? But the person in front is just listening to some music. So that means that he only has himself. You see, these destructive emotions, so to say, they only bring suffering to ourselves. That's very clear. And to prevent that from happening, we need a kind of training of the mind. It is a mental process. That these destructive emotions come up is a mental process. To transform them is a process. Right? So that's kind of an aspect of mental training over time. So first of all, you have to be aware that there's an issue. That's the first step. So that's the awareness building. If that awareness building and you see there's an issue, then the next question is, can I do something about it? So also the Buddha said initially, if there's a problem, analyze the nature of the problem. And then if there's a problem and you recognize the nature of a problem, you would like to know the cause of the problem. So same as being in the hospital, same thing, right? We have to know the nature of the sickness, we have to know the cause of the sickness, right? And then question number 3, then the Buddha said, look if it's possible to get cured or to eliminate this problem. If it's not possible, then we're wasting our time, right? If it's not possible to transform your mind and be happy human beings, then we shouldn't be here. And it's just a waste of time. But it is possible to transform the mind. It is possible to get cured. Okay? So that's question number 3. So first you have the nature of the problem or the nature of the suffering. Second question is the cause of the suffering or the cause of the problem. And then the third question is it possible to do something about it? Or is it possible to get cured? If so, what is the treatment? If so, how? So the same pattern the Buddha followed in his first teaching, called the teaching on the Four Noble Truths. You see what is the problem, you see what is the cause of all this, and then you see if it's possible to do something about it, and then do something about it. So it's a very structured, scientific approach to issues in life, so to say. So our problem, or the suffering we experience, generally speaking, is rooted in destructive emotions. Things that disturb our peace of mind, so to say. And these destructive emotions come and go, and the first step is to be aware of it. So we will do now a short meditation on that to generate more awareness of what happens in our mind. And if you have more awareness of what happens in our mind, you understand these destructive emotions better. You understand the nature, you understand how they are caused, and you also understand they are just a fluctuation in the mind. It's just coming and going. And by seeing that aspect, you know, and you can also learn how to redirect your mind. You don't have to follow them if you don't want to. And you don't have to follow them if you don't want to. Initially, that is not that easy. But over time, it's possible to generate techniques to be in more control, to actually follow the things you want to follow in your mind. And that's only the first basic principal aspect of that, is to build more awareness. So for that point of view, we first of all have to get a kind of awareness within our mind. That means with meditation, what we try to accomplish is to cut down temporarily we cut down our distractions. Yeah? So that means we try to be in a place that's reasonably quiet. We try to put our phone away or out of sight, even the best, and airplane mode or something like that. And then we try to generate a kind of awareness building with an object of concentration, as I just mentioned, the breath. So we do a concentration on the breath, and then whenever there's a thought coming of the past or the future, we try not to follow. We try to be in the present and try to, only concentrate on the counting of the breath. So being in the present by itself is already giving peace of mind. And we see that people in extreme sports, for example, they do the same thing. People who do extreme sports, they get a kick. Why do they get a kick out of it? Because they really have the sharpness of the mind in the present. Yeah, if you do free skiing, for example, from a mountain, and you're not in the present, and there's quite some trees there, it can be quite destructive, right? So you have to really be in the present in those kind of extreme sports, and that gives people a kick. Because if you're in the present, it gives peace of mind. Because you don't think about the past, you don't think about the future, so it's kind of, because we have the peace of mind within us, we have happiness within us, but we haven't touched upon it. That's the problem. We have one quality of our mind, as we say, is clear knowing, or there's a clarity of the mind, or the clear-eyed mind, as we call it. Yeah, our mind, the more subtler forms of consciousness, so to say, they are free of stains, they are free of afflictions. Once you touch upon those aspects of the clarity of the mind, then there is much more satisfaction and much more inner happiness, so to say. And you can see that what the meditators accomplish in these kind of retreats, that they complete control of the mind. It's very interesting stories about that they really experience the mind itself. Yeah, we often don't really experience that because our mind is occupied by thoughts, our mind is occupied by past and future, we're never really in the present. Yeah, so if you learn how to be in the present, then you get a little bit of peace of mind. Even just a few deep breaths sometimes helps people to relax, and that gives a kind of happiness. So if you habituate yourself to that aspect, you get some more peace of mind, but on top of that, you become more aware of things that come and go, because you look from a peaceful state, or you look from a quiet state. Yeah, that's kind of what we are saying. If you have an issue in the work field, or in family, or whatsoever, if you sometimes take a break, and you come back, you look at it completely differently. Right? Yeah, so that means if you have a distance, and because of that you have better awareness, you understand things much better, you see things much clearer, then you can deal with issues much better. Right? So it's exactly true with our mind as well. We try to be in the present, get the clarity, and then from there look at things. And then don't get too much involved in whatever comes to mind. So that's kind of a technique we use initially to generate this kind of clarity of the mind, to generate a kind of concentration. And with that, you train your mind not to follow various thought patterns, but to try to follow one thing at a time. In this case, the counting of the breath. Yeah, so maybe we can give that a try. If you want to follow, then what we do, you can sit on the chair, or you can sit on the floor, or that doesn't matter. The most important aspect is that the spine is straight, and the head is slightly bent forward, right? And then in one way that the spine is to the crown of your head in one line. That's kind of an important aspect of the channels, as we call it about in more sophisticated meditation techniques. And then the hands you can just put in your lap, and then what we try to do here, you don't force the breath, and you breathe in and out through your nostrils, and you don't force it. And then what you try to do is just the only thing that you should do for, let's say we do that for a minute or two, is to count your breath. Yeah, you just count it from 1 to 10, and then you start over with counting. Yeah? And then whenever there's a thought coming up of what you did this morning, or what you're going to do after this session, you not really follow that. That can wait. those thoughts can wait. You just let them go like clouds in the sky, drifting past, and what you do is just go back to the counting of the breath and nothing else. So when your mind goes out, when you think about something or when you hear something outside, you bring it back bring it back to what you're supposed to be doing, and that's the counting of the breath. Okay? So maybe we can give that a try for, let's say, a minute or two. Just only count the in-breath as 1, and then out-breath as 2, and then in-breath as 3. So you count mentally for yourself from 1 to 10, and then you start over counting and make sure as soon as there's a thought pattern coming, or think of the past or the future, just don't pay attention. Only go back to the counting of the breath. Okay, so let's do that for about a minute or so. Yeah, so make sure whenever you're drifting away, or you hear something, or you follow that sound, or you follow that thought, then try not to do that, and try to bring your mind back to the counting of the breath. Yeah? So make sure you try to keep focused on the counting of the breath. Alright, so then we can stop. So if you do these kind of techniques, then you will see that initially it looks like there's more thoughts than before, which is actually a good sign. Because before you were not aware of thoughts. And many people, they're not really aware of the distractions in their life, because they're constantly exposed to activation of sensory perception. They never really have time to look inside. We see that in modern times, if you ask a person to sit still on a chair for 10 or 15 minutes in a room like this, but without any internet access and without any mobile phone or whatsoever, for some people it's quite challenging. So that's the level we have reached in society, that we very much distracted constantly from external kind of activations of the senses. Right? And that's why we sometimes lose the peace of mind. But if you go inwards, like with these kind of techniques, initially it looks like difficult, initially it looks like there's more thoughts and it's difficult to focus. But over time, there's a possibility of training that because you get more aware of the thoughts. Right? So you see more thoughts initially, and then over time you get more focus, and then you're capable of directing your mind better. And whenever there's a thought coming up, you think, okay, I shouldn't follow this. Now I'm concentrating on the breath, nothing else. So whenever the mind goes out, you bring it back. Whenever it goes there, you bring it back. So if you train in this kind of technique, later on, when there's negative thoughts coming up throughout the day, then you know how to redirect. Or what you could do is every morning you spend a few minutes on this kind of training of counting the breath. And then every hour or so you try to get back to the peace of mind. And then if you keep your mind calm, even every hour, there's less possibility for stress to come. There's less possibility to go in a stress strain or to go in a kind of habituation pattern of following agitation or whatsoever. So that's kind of a technique we see in many Buddhist traditions that you in the morning you do a few minutes of these kind of techniques of counting the breath, and then throughout the day, every hour or so, you try to be a bit aware of the quietness of the mind, and you keep the peace of mind. And with keeping the peace of mind, you're capable of redirecting your mind and to actually have more peace of mind throughout the day. Yeah? So that's kind of a few techniques that are universal aspects of the Buddhist practice, you could say. Yeah, that can be done by anybody. And we see the similar techniques also in other traditions as well. Yeah? So yeah, maybe we have a short break. Yeah? What we said, about 20 minutes, was it, Alfred? Yeah? Yeah. So let's say we have a break until, what is it? 40, what is it? Yeah, let's say 45 then, yeah? Till quarter to 2, yeah? And then we gather again, and then we will go over another methodology, which is kind of a way to transform these destructive emotions in a way what we call an analytical meditation. Yeah, that's a different kind of technique. Yeah, so thank you very much for the first session, and then stretch your legs or have a break and have something to drink, and then we start again quarter to 2. Okay. And also, if there's any questions, then maybe towards the end of the next session, we can have a Q&A session. Also, people online, we can put it in the chat, and then we can answer the questions as well. Okay. Okay. So then, have something to drink. Yeah. Yeah, so I think we more or less, it's time. I lived in India for about 2 decades, as I said, so yeah, time is quite relative. But yeah, in UK we were punctual. Yeah, so the previous session we talked about distraction, and we talked about the mind wanders off and it's not in the present, right? So it's important to first step is to generate awareness, and that awareness comes from being in the present. If you are in the present, your mind is more calm, and because it's more calm, it's more control. You know, when we get stressed, when we get tired, we might lose it easier. It's much easier to lose our peace of mind and our understanding of others when you're tired. And when you're tired also, that triggers kind of negative thought patterns. Yeah, we know our mind works very much with habituation patterns. And that's why we call the real meaning of meditation is to habituate your mind to a positive pattern. So that's kind of when you habituate your mind to a positive pattern, that will repeat itself in the future. And the more you do that, the more possibility of it becomes spontaneous without effort. And that can be accomplished. Yeah? In the Buddhist doctrine, that is not really part of the secular aspects, as we plan to talk about today, but there are possibilities of generating states of mind that are free of disturbance. Yeah? There are high levels of meditative states, so to say, when there is no disturbance of mind. Yeah? There's only peace of mind, and of course, because of the peace of mind, there's more caring about others. Yeah? So we say the more subtle our mind becomes, the more peaceful it becomes, and when it becomes more peaceful, there's more concern for others. And we see a similar thing happening, probably in a place like a hospital. Probably you have already noticed a few cases of a near-death experience. You know, people go in cardiac arrest, and we do CPR and bring people back to life. Yeah? So there are cases of people who are in this near-death experience, yeah? when there's a clinical death for a few seconds or a minute or two, and the person comes back to life. And then we see when they come back to life, they talk about a particular experience. Yeah? And most of the experience people have are very uniform. They're very similar. And what happens, according to the Buddhist tradition, is at a time of death, then the coarser forms of consciousness cease to exist. Yeah? The sensory perceptions, so to say, they seem to cease to exist, and a more subtle form of consciousness becomes more manifest. And that's why people who experience that experience, they talk about it. Peaceful minds, being an ego dissolution is happening, or people feel more connected with others, people feel more compassionate with others. And also when they come back to life in these kind of cases, that means that their life transforms. They become more spiritual, they become more compassionate, they start to value life more, and they think more about others. It's very interesting. That means that the more subtle our mind becomes, then we touch upon the innate qualities of our mind. And often in day-to-day life, we don't have access to those innate qualities of the mind because we have a disturbance. We have a disturbance of thought patterns, and we have a disturbance of destructive emotions. Yeah? So it's like you could think about, now looking here, in the temple, blue and white is very similar to our mind. You know? That, or the blue sky and the overcast. The blue sky remains blue, even if there are clouds. So our mind itself, the purity of the mind remains the same, but just temporarily it's overcast by clouds or disturbed by clouds. It doesn't mean that the blue sky gets disturbed, but our contact with that peaceful mind is gone. So, and sometimes the clouds are a little bit more dark than other times, so that means our mind gets disturbed by negative thought patterns. If it's irritation or anger or excessive strong forms of desire, that moves our mind in a particular direction. And then when we follow that, then the outcome is often not really an innate form of happiness, right? The outcome is often the form of disturbance of mind, and even can cause problems of harming others, saying something wrong to another the person, which you later on regret. So you can see that the innate nature of the mind basically is pure. That from a Buddhist point of view, we say the most subtle form of mind is pure. It's without stains, like the blue sky. The blue sky remains blue. Our innate peaceful mind with all the qualities remains the same, but if you don't have access to it, then you never recognize it. Yeah, so that's kind of an aspect of mind science that helps us to understand this purity of the mind. The purity of the mind can be understood a little bit more if you do this kind of concentration or placement meditations as we just did in the first session. Yeah, if you just count your breath from 1 to 10, and you do that back and forth, then over time, what can happen is that you cut off destructive emotions, you cut off for that period of time, you cut off disturbing thoughts that are disturbing you, and you're just there with your peace of mind, right? And then if you get out of that meditation and you act from within that kind of peace of mind, then you will have less inclination to get disturbed or say something wrong to a person. That's why I said, if you do that meditation like every morning, and then every hour or so, you just for a minute do for breathing, so you just go back to the peace of mind, then it's much easier not to get disturbed by events in the external world. Yeah, we know we cannot prevent people meeting people we don't like. That's quite easy to realize that, right? That's not a very difficult aspect of understanding, right? So if you have one person you don't get along with, you try to escape that person. When you walk somewhere else, you meet a similar person, or maybe even a person who's worse, right? We cannot escape meeting people who are sometimes difficult to deal with. That's no possibility. But what we try to do is not try to avoid the situation, but try to walk with those situations. To mentally be able to do something with it in a constructive way. Yeah, and that's why we have an ancient saying. It's very straightforward saying by one of the great masters of ancient India, of the Buddhist traditions, called Shantideva. And this master said, you know, if the whole world is filled with thorns and you cannot walk without hurting your feet, you can do two things. You can cover the whole world in leather, or you cover your own feet. What's easier? Right? So that's quite easy. That's quite clear that covering your own feet is easier, right? So that means if you train your own mind, then whatever situation you meet, you will be able to deal with. And that's kind of a potential we all have. If you are, you know, like us, dressed up like this and being a Buddhist monk, or if you are walking, you know, everybody has that potential, right? So everybody has this potential to do this. That you can train your mind in order to deal with situations much better than before. And that's kind of what we try to get at in our mind trainings. Not to try to escape, not try to suppress, but to try to transform this whole process. So how do we do that? We say the first step is awareness. Yeah? You need to be aware of what's happening inside your mind. Without that awareness, you cannot really start even. If you don't really know you're disturbed, and you don't really know you're saying something out of this disturbance, then you will never be able to act properly. So first step is this awareness, as we just talked about. When this awareness has been built, then the next step is the transformation. Yeah, that what we call a kind of regulation or emotional regulation, you can call it. That you try to understand what's going on, what's actually triggering this irritation, what's actually triggering this negative thought, what's behind it. You know? And that's a very important aspect to be understood. And for that to be understood well, then we have to understand the disturbance of our mind. Yeah? What we call the destructive emotions, so to say. Because we know that deep down below, our mind has this purity. And then on the surface, we have this kind of disturbance of mind. So every person, even the worst criminal, can change the mind. I just mentioned our project in the Central Prison in Bangalore, in South India. But you also in the West, there's many projects with inmates or with criminals. And you can see that if you deal in a correct, constructive way with inmates, you can change them. And we can see that, for example, in Norborn Prison in Norway, for example, they accomplish very interesting figures that only like 30 to 40% falls back, or 20 to 30 I should say, 20 to 30% falls back to the previous habits as a criminal when they come out of prison. But if you look in the UK, it's like 50 to 60%. If you look in the US, it's 70 to 80%. Right? So that means if you deal with you also there in that particular prison in Norway, they don't call them guards, but they call them guides. It's very interesting. They work with the inmates like a human being, right? And in a way to help them to enhance positive states. It is physical exercise like yoga or social activities, and they accomplish quite something. So that means every person can train their mind. There's no excuses or no excuses is one aspect we can talk about for ourselves, that we should not think, oh, it's all too difficult and put it aside, because everybody can train the mind. You know? It's just a matter of putting some effort. And that's true. The Buddha also said, that's also a very interesting aspect of Buddhism, the Buddha said, I cannot take away your suffering. I cannot take away your causes for suffering. I cannot wash away your negative thoughts or your negative habituation patterns or whatsoever. I cannot give my insights to you, but I can teach you how to do it. And that's really true. That if it comes from the Buddha, if it comes from any other form of spirituality or tradition, that means that we have to do it ourselves, right? It's not a magical pill you can get and all your problems will be solved. We have to do it ourselves. So how do we do that? How do we then go from this awareness, as we did with the previous session, of counting the breath and become more aware of the thought patterns, become more aware of the various thoughts that come and the various emotions that come and go. That's the first step. If you don't have that, then you cannot walk with it. First, you have to have a clear picture of what's going on. So that's the first step. The second step is what we call emotional regulation. Yeah? To be able to regulate yourself, to be able to transform the destructive emotions into constructive ones. So how do we do that? Yeah, that's kind of the next step. So this emotional regulation comes, first of all, recognizing what are these destructive emotions doing. What is their function? What is their nature? What do they do? And also even more than that, can I actually transform this or not? That's kind of two important questions. Yeah, its nature, its function, what do they do? And is it possible to transform it? So then we see that destructive emotions like irritation or anger, for example, which is a quite clear destructive emotion, as I just talked about my friend in the Central Prison of Bangalore who committed the crime of murder. A very nice person. Actually, he's very nice. He does a lot of good work for all the inmates in the Central Prison in Bangalore. And a very nice person to talk to. But he just said, I made a mistake. I was not in control. So that means that these destructive emotions, that's why we call them destructive emotions, they not only disturb our mind, but also they can disturb others. Yeah? So that's kind of an aspect we try to understand. So destructive emotions, so to say, what do they do? First of all, we can see an irritation like anger or hatred, for example. You see that a destructive emotion like that is disturbing our mind. That's quite clear. When it comes up, it disturbs the mind, and then on top of that, we lose the peace of mind, and on top of that, we cannot think clearly. That's very clear. You get very much irritation of anger or hatred that comes up, then the clarity goes, the possibility to think clearly, the peace of mind goes, and the control of the mind goes. Yeah? So that's kind of one aspect. In our classical text, we say that these destructive emotions, or we classify them as afflictions, they actually have the function to disturb the peace of mind. That's one of its nature. But then the question is, because that's a very important question. Yeah? In the previous session, we talked about the Buddha's first teaching, what we call the Four Noble Truths, that the Buddha said, okay, there's suffering, or there's a problem, as we said, or there's a sickness, and that nature should be understood, the nature of the problem, and then you should understand the cause of all this. And then on top of that, you should know there's a method or there's a possibility to eliminate this. So that's our very important questions. So first of all, the nature of this destructive emotion, as we just talked about, like irritation of anger or hatred, that disturbs the mind. And because of that disturbance, we don't have the clarity. And because we don't have the clarity, we make the wrong decisions, or we say the wrong things. So that's kind of a few aspects of the nature of this disturbance of the mind. And they are caused by the kind of ego aspect. That's also quite clear, that we very much inclined to fight for a particular self-identity, or to fight for your own purpose or your own importance, so to say. So that's related. So then that's one aspect of the destructive emotions. The other aspect, which is very important to know, is can I eliminate these destructive emotions? If that's not possible, I said, then we're just wasting our time here, right? But it is possible, because our mind is like the sky. Yeah? The mind is like this blue sky that is just temporarily, and in the UK it's quite easy to see that with the clouds coming and going and the overcast. I lived in South India, where we have most of the time blue sky, and just only in the monsoon a few showers. So coming to the UK was a bit of a challenge. But that means that temporarily these clouds are there, because the blue sky is always behind. So that's one of the reasons why we can eliminate these destructive emotions, because deep down below, the nature of our mind has purity. The nature of our mind has qualities. Of love and kindness, compassion, and patience, qualities like that. So deep down below, and the peace of mind is there. We don't have access to it. Yeah? Or sometimes we talk about an ocean or a lake. Yeah? On the surface, there's a lot of coming and going of the waves. But deep down below, there's stillness. So our mind is very similar. On the surface, there's a lot of disturbance, but deep down below, there's this clarity, or this peace of mind. The thing is, we don't have the capacity in most cases with an untrained mind to make it manifest, to make this peace of mind become more manifest. But with the technique we discussed in the previous session, then you're capable of touching upon this purity of the mind a little bit more. So then that by itself is a temporary aspect of obtaining more peace of mind. To go back and to understand this peace of mind and to try to make it manifest. That's kind of a temporary thing. Eventually, we have to walk with these destructive emotions that we do in an analytical meditation, because our mind does exactly the same. When we get irritated, or when there is very strong desire, our mind is capable within a few split seconds to say, this person I don't like. Why? Because of this, because of that, because of this, that. And then straight away you come to the conclusion, and for you that's the truth. Even if your best friend pats you on the shoulder and said, no, come on, this person also this well, that well, you say, no, not true. Because you believe your own idea of reality, which is maybe in most cases not really there. And so that means that this destructive emotions, so to say, they make us believe a particular reality is there when it's not. Yeah, so with anger or irritation, we can say that when it's very strong, that 80 to 90% of what appears to your mind at that time is mentally fabricated. And that is not only in Buddhist kind of aspects the case, also in science. Aaron Beck, a professor at the University of Pennsylvania, he comes to the same conclusion. He says 80 to 90% of what people perceive in the rage of anger is mentally fabricated. It's not really there. And so we easily make an aspect of reality in our mind, and then we believe that to be reality. So anger overestimates the faults of a particular individual, or overestimates the faults of a particular situation, but it's often not there. Yeah? And then I said before, your best friend pats you on the shoulder and said, no, come on, it's not too bad after all. And you say, no, not true. You don't believe that person, you believe your own destructive emotion. And that's kind of a problem. Yeah? So that's what we see with these kind of destructive emotions, that they're very sneaky. They're very sneaky aspects of our mind. They make us believe something which is maybe not a reality. Yeah, because the person we annoyed with can be the dearest friend of somebody else. Right? So that means our perception is very subjective. Yeah, our perception is very subjective. While somebody else can see the person we dislike as a dearest friend. Okay? So that's, you can see it's a very subjective aspect of consciousness. Okay? So then anger overestimates the faults, so to say, and that's not in accordance with reality. Because persons have qualities, but when you have strong anger coming up or hatred, you don't like to see those qualities. You only focus on faults. Yeah? So that's kind of why we see that one of the other aspects of a destructive emotion, not only that disturbs the mind, but it also is not in accordance with reality. It's also true with strong desire or attachment, as we call it. When you order your favorite food online, if it's Italian food or Indian food or whatever you like, yeah? And you look at the app and you see the picture and you already imagine how it looks like. You already imagine how it will taste. Yeah? And then in your mind you create a kind of reality. If I have this meal, I will be happy because this meal will be like this, meal will be like that. And then you order it, and then it's, first of all, it's not hot. Then you want spicy food, it's not spicy. Or you don't want spicy food, and it's too spicy. Right? So you can see our mental expectations is not out there with the food we ordered. The expectations are created inside the mind. Yeah? So then you can see that destructive emotions are not in accordance with reality. They make us believe an aspect of reality that's not really there. And we see the exactly same thing in anxiety, fear, depression, low self-esteem. We see the same pattern continuing, that people make themselves believe it's like this. Well, it's not the case. So that's kind of a very interesting aspect of that our mind is sometimes very sneaky in making us believe a particular aspect of reality which is not really out there. You know? So that's a very important aspect of not only this awareness building, but this emotional regulation. So the more you understand what we say, the faults of the affliction and the qualities of its antidote, or like if you practice patience, for example, you be able to have a more peaceful state of mind, make strong decisions. You can be very active. Yeah? Patience doesn't mean to be a doormat or something like that. Right? So you can be peaceful inside and being quite direct with people. That's possible. If you're direct with people, but inside there's irritation, then often the outcome is not very constructive. So the thing is that you stay in this presence, or you stay in this peaceful state of mind. You have the clarity, and within that clarity, you can be very active. Yeah? Doesn't, to be a practitioner of patience doesn't mean to be a cooked vegetable or something and being quiet all the time, right? It can be a very active one, but inside, peace of mind, and very constructive outwardly. That's kind of what we try to accomplish. Yeah? So these destructive emotions are the opposite. Yeah? Destructive emotions, they disturb our mind, so we don't have the clarity, we don't have the control, and then they just lead us into trouble. Yeah? So with anger and irritation and hatred, it brings kind of destructive aspect in our mind and destructive behavior. Yeah? And then on top of that, with attachment and desire, we can see we have too many expectations of our object of desire, which are not there, but mentally created. And then when we meet that object, we're not satisfied. Yeah? So you see that with people with addictions, exactly the same thing. Yeah? When you have an addiction and you have, if I have this, I need this because of this and this and this and this, you make yourself an own reality that you need this, and then when you have it, there's no satisfaction. And then you see, people with addiction problems, they one after the other, they eventually need a cocktail of various things, right? So you can see that's based on what we call desire or attachment beyond control. Yeah? So you have too many expectations which are not met because it's created in the mind, and then you don't have any satisfaction. Yeah? So same as I talked in the previous session with people going on a world trip, to go here and there, to expect this and that, and then it's not there and there's no satisfaction. Right? So, and we know that from some pub groups also, I haven't found what I'm looking for, or I can get no satisfaction, right? So I don't know to which extent how profound their lyrics were for their mind, but it gives a message that there are aspects of reality that we expect, but we don't really find it. Yeah? So that's kind of a mental kind of creation. So yeah, that's one aspect of these destructive emotions. They make us believe a reality that's not there. Yeah? So it's very clear to examine and to analyze. And another aspect is that we see, as I just mentioned briefly, that it's based, there are reasonings, but the reasonings are not valid. We say, I don't like this person. Why? Because this person said this to me. That person did that. That person did this and that. So we make ourselves believe this person is bad because of certain reasonings that might not be valid. But we make us believe they are valid. So that's kind of what we try to counteract. The way to counteract that is to use what we call an analytical meditation. So in the previous session, we talked about a meditation that brings us in the presence, a meditation that helps us to build awareness. So this meditation is more about emotional regulation, to transform your mind. So that's kind of what we call an analytical meditation. So what you do in an analytical meditation is that you analyze the problem, or you analyze the faults of the affliction, and you analyze the benefits of its antidotes, and then you shift those two, in the sense, then you make yourself believe it's more constructive to follow the constructive forms of thinking, like practicing patience, rather than to follow the mind of irritation. So that's kind of how we do that. So the way to do that is that we see that destructive emotions, as we just talked about, are just a temporary thing of the mind. They're not always present, luckily. And we know behind that is this clarity of the mind. So we know these destructive emotions are very temporary. They're not always present. One aspect, why we can actually eliminate them. Another aspect is that they're not in accordance with reality. We just saw that anger overestimates the qualities, and anger overestimates the faults, and attachment overestimates the qualities. So you see, they're not in accordance with reality. It's just a mental creation. That's the second reason. And the third reason is that our mind is momentary changing. We can change the mind. And we can see thoughts come and go, and emotions come and go, and happiness, forms of peace of mind, forms of disturbance come and go. We know our mind is what we call impermanent. Our mind is momentary changing. And because our mind is impermanent and momentary changing, that indicates that it's possible to change it. That when we play with the right conditions, we can move it in a particular direction. And that movement in a particular direction, or that change, we accomplish eventually with an analytical meditation. So first you do a kind of concentration meditation, as we did in the previous session, to be more aware of what's going on inside your mind. And then the next level is to apply it in an analytical meditation. So in an analytical meditation, you just sit down and think about things. You sit down and think, okay, look, I got irritated yesterday. What happened? What did it do to my mind? How did I react? Was there a benefit or was there no benefit? How did it go later on when I went home? I was disturbed. I said something wrong. I regretted. I couldn't sleep. You think about the drawbacks, so to say, of a destructive emotion like anger. And then you do that for as we will do now, for a few minutes. You do that, let's say, for a minute or two. Then you come to a conclusion to see, true. This disturbance of anger or hatred really disturbed my mind, and I really said something wrong. It was not constructive at all. And you come to that conclusion, and then if you focus on that conclusion, you get an insight into this destructive aspect of anger. Then at the same time, you try to analyze the benefits of patience. If you keep your mind calm, you can still say the right things. You can still be in control of the situation and talk about things, right? So that's kind of, you see the benefits of practicing patience, and then you analyze that. And you see all the people who are capable of guiding a meeting in a very structured way without irritation, and working for the benefit the meeting or the team or what has to be accomplished. Yeah? And then moving the team in a particular direction in a very constructive way by the power of not getting irritated, by the power of practicing patience, but being very constructive. So then you contemplate the benefits of patience and you come to a conclusion and you focus on that conclusion. Yeah? So if you do that, if you contemplate the faults of anger and you contemplate the benefits of practicing patience, and then you come to conclusions and you focus on that conclusion, those conclusions, then you put stable, what we call potential in your mind. Yeah, habituation pattern you put in your mind. Then throughout the day, when these emotions start to come up, when you meet a person you're irritated with, you will more likely be inclined to remember your insight of the morning, of your contemplation. If you remember your insight, you will, with the previous meditation we did, first of all, you'll be more aware of things. You will see that at coming, the first few irritations coming up in your mind, and then, because of the other analytical meditation, you will see, if I follow this, it's not constructive. And that gives you a kind of what we call mindfulness, that you remember your positive pattern of your mind in the morning, you remember the insight of the faults of anger and the benefits of practicing patience, and that will give you the force or the power not really to follow that destructive emotions at the time. So that's how we actually counteract or how we transform a destructive emotion like anger or hatred into patience. Right? So it's kind of not suppressing, it's not try to avoid, but it's just to analyze and transform it. That's what it is. It's kind of based on this awareness, you recognize things in the mind and you analyze it, and then you try to move it in a particular direction or transform it. Yeah? So maybe we do a short contemplation on that before we go to Q&A. Yeah? So that what we do again a little bit of concentration meditation, right? So the counting of the breath for, let's say, a minute or so, and then you go back to an event where you got irritated in your recent past, today or yesterday or a few days ago. But don't get involved. Yeah? The thing is, you analyze from a neutral perspective. You just see, okay, what happened? What did I do? What happened in my mind? How did I react? And then see, is that constructive or not? And then you come to a conclusion that this irritation of anger or hatred actually was very destructive. And you focus on that conclusion, and then you analyze, okay, but if I take another angle to it, if I keep my mind calm and practice patience, and I can still say the right thing, like a teacher or a parent can still be very direct with children or with patients or whatsoever, but inside there's peace of mind. Then it's much more constructive. Yeah? You see the benefits of practicing patience, and then you focus on that a little bit. So the way you do that, you habituate your mind to the benefits of practicing patience in that way. Yeah, so let's give it a try. Yeah, so first, before we do the analytical meditation, we do first the concentration meditation, as we did in the previous session, to build up a kind of awareness, right? By the power of concentrating on one point, in this case, the counting of the breath, in order to not get distracted and to keep focused on that. For a minute or so. So let's give it a try, to count the breath from 1 to 10. So breathe naturally into the nostrils and out, and then you can count every in-breath as 1, and out-breath as 2, and in-breath as 3, and you count from 1 to 10, and then start over counting. And make sure, as soon as you hear something, your mind drifts off, or you think about the past or the future, just don't pay attention to it and keep counting the breath. Okay? That's the only thing you're doing at the moment. So let's do that for about a minute or so. Yeah. So then whenever the mind drifts off to thoughts, then make sure you don't pay attention. Just let it go, right? Like the clouds in the sky, those thoughts can wait. So make sure the only thing you're doing is accounting on the breath. So then when the mind is settled down a bit, then you try to recall an event, a recent event, where we got irritated or angry or strong hatred arose, and then just observe, like a scientist observing particular phenomena. Right? Just from a distance observe what happened, what happened to my mind? Did it get disturbed? Did I lose my peace of mind? Was I happy or unhappy? What did I say? How did other people react? Was it constructive or not? So see that when you get irritated, that you lose a peace of mind, you might say something wrong. You lose a clarity, you cannot analyze properly, and because of that, it's not very constructive. So analyze it for yourself, is that true or not? For, let's say, about a minute or so. And then, at the same time, try to look at, if you keep your mind peaceful, if you keep practicing patience, for example, you keep your clarity of the mind, and you can still be very direct with people. You can still say things and, control the meeting, so to say, or have the clarity from a distance and make sure you can say the right constructive things at the right time. That's what it means to practice patience and be active. Right? So see that that's much more constructive than getting irritated. Right? So see the benefits, so to say, of keeping the mind at peace and being very direct, but no irritation. And so see the benefits of that aspect for yourself for about a minute or so. And then try to come to a conclusion, right, that sees that the mind that follows irritation or anger, is very disturbing and the clarity is not there and you might say something wrong. Well, the mind of patience actually keeps the clarity, keeps a constructive way of being able to analyze and say the right things at the right time. So see that attitude of the mind is actually much more constructive. So come to that conclusion and then focus on that conclusion for about, let's say, half a minute. Yeah, so then we can stop. Stop. Yeah. So then what we produce with this kind of insight is because we're talking about habituation patterns in the mind, right? So the more you have an habituation pattern to something positive, in this case, this transformation of destructive emotions into constructive ones, the more you do that, the more you will actually go in that particular direction of these constructive ways of thinking and going forward. So the first step is this awareness building, as we did in the first session, right? The concentration meditation, to be in the present, to make sure that you follow the things you like to follow, in this case, the counting of the breath. So you can redirect your mind when it's needed. And then to actually transform the mind, we have this emotional regulation, meaning you analyze the faults of destructive emotions and the benefits of the constructive ones, and by that process you transform the mind in that way. So you can see building awareness is the first step. The second step is this emotional regulation, and that proves then eventually the transformation in the mind to have more constructive ways of thinking, and to transform these destructive emotions actually, and achieve more peace of mind and more well-being, so to say, and less disturbance by these destructive emotions. Yeah. So we said, in the end, there's time for Q&A. I don't know if people here or online have questions. Then I'm mostly more into the question-answer sessions than into the talking, because I lived in a monastic institution for about 2 decades, and most of our time is spent on the debate courtyard. It's a very interactive way of examining reality or examining the mind in a question-answer session, and a very sharp and a very constructive form of discussion. So we spend sometimes hours a day doing that. So I don't know if there's any questions online.
Yes, I've got an observation and a question. Is that okay? The observation is I'm doing what's called Lean Six Sigma. Have you heard of it?
What?
Lean Six Sigma. It's a methodology for quality improvement.
Okay.
And I'm just observing how it follows actually what you're talking about, where you identify the problem, the root cause, then you do an intervention to change that situation. So that was just my observation, actually. It's a methodology that's used in industry and also in this hospital, believe it or not, for quality improvement.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a universal technique, because that's the nature of our mind, right? So there's a nature of reality. So if you use that technique, then if it's used from a Buddhist point of view or from another kind of angle, then it produces the same kind of result, right?
Yes. My question is, when you're getting a control of your thoughts, you're trying to limit ego, if not eradicate ego. What's happening to the persona?
What's happening to the?
Persona, the person.
The person behind it. Oh, that's a very sophisticated question. So I cannot answer that within a few minutes probably, but in Buddhism we talk about a person that conventionally exists. And we talk about a person that does not exist. So, for example, when strong destructive emotions come up, there's a very strong sense of an ego. So, I need this, I need that. Or how dare this person say this to me? I didn't do this. So the way the I appears in a very solid, independent way. So we say that nothing can exist in an independent way. Everything is in nature of dependence. So that means that we cannot really pinpoint or find anything solid existing without dependence. So that kind of ego, or that kind of person, is just a perception. As Aniel said, one of the UK neuroscientists, very well-respected neuroscientist, he's also said this perception of this kind of a self is just a perception. Or David Hume, Scottish philosopher, calls the self as a bundle of perceptions. The bundle of perceptions exists. That's clear. But there is no, what we call, from its own side, existing entity there, although it appears. For example, it's a very easy trick. If I ask you, please get angry in 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3, go for it, right? then for some people it's difficult. But if I say, look at your hair, look at your glasses, what are you wearing today? Then the ego comes up and they say, oh, dare Namdak say this to me. I am not like this. And because of this I that comes up, there's a kind of destructive emotion that follows. So that means there's a correlation between a destructive emotion and a perception of the self. And there's different forms of perception of the self and different forms of persons. Certain aspects are related with the identity existing from its own side, which we don't really accept as an existing phenomenon because nothing exists without dependence, right? And there's a person that sits here and listens and thinks about this. And that conventional person exists. Right? So yeah, this is kind of more in-depth philosophy, as we call it. But we see similar things in science, you know. Like David Bohm, one of the world-leading physicists in quantum mechanics. David Bohm also says something very interesting. He says this self-deceptive thought, or this self-identity, as he calls it, is the cause for many problems in society. Causes us to make a distinction between us and them, causes discrimination, causes security. We need security, we need power. And then he says, but this self-deceptive thought is just a show. It's not really there. Because he sees in the field of matter, quantum mechanics, he sees that nothing exists that independent as it appears. So sometimes the ego that comes up when destructive emotions are strong, that ego also seems to appear in a very independent way. Right? And that we don't really think that exists. You know? But there is a compassionate person there that thinks and that reads and that contemplates and asks questions. You know? So that's in Buddhism we talk about a person that exists and a person that does not exist. And the destructive emotions are rooted in, as we say, ignorance, in misunderstanding the self. Yeah? So that means if you grasp towards the self as an independent entity, then the destructive emotions will be stronger. And we see that in the science. You know, if you look into the science, behavior science, the people who are narcissistic, right? You can see people with a strong ego and being narcissistic. Their emotional life is very complex. They have a lot of destructive emotions, and on top of that, they even cause harm to others. You know? So that's a very interesting aspect. And then another aspect where we see people with trauma or people struggling with mental difficulties or mental challenges. In the research with psychedelics, for example, you see that when there is an ego dissolution that is happening, that people actually feel more at peace, and it's a temporary thing, right? This research with using psychedelics is just a temporary thing, but it seems to indicate that if there is an ego dissolution, and then there's not the conventional person, but this independent ego that comes up when destructive emotions arise, that dissolves, and then people feel more connected and feel more compassionate and feel more with others, and brings more happiness to the mind. Right? So yeah, there's just a few angles you can look at it. Sorry, but it's a very in-depth philosophical question, right? Yeah. So in India, when you travel in India, then the first question is, what's your name? Yeah. The second question is, where are you from? The third question is, what do you do for a living? Fourth question is, how much money do you own every month? And then the fifth question is, what do you think is the ultimate nature of reality? So in the UK, I think if you go to your pub or the pub close by and you ask this question about the self, I think these questions will be a little bit more challenging, right? Yeah. So it's a highly debatable point. Which person does exist and which person does not exist? Same with Atma and Atma in Hindu philosophy, for example, or self and no self. So it's very important to know which Atma or which self or which soul does exist, or which person does exist, and which does not exist. But yeah, that's kind of not really the topic of today, because I thought I'd keep it a bit simple today. Yeah.
Thank you. Very interesting. Coming from a slightly different Buddhist tradition.
The Buddhist?
Tradition, yeah. The approach with the emotion would be slightly different, as you can expect. And the emphasis is more on holding the energy, catching it, holding it, feeling it in the body.
How? I just, the sound is a bit...
And feeling it in the body. Opening up the body,
Yeah.
feeling it in the body. Let it grate me away,
Yeah.
which is, it burns.
Yeah.
And when it is very strong, my teacher used to say, 9, full prostration, the Tibetan way, down to the floor, find yourself some. But then it occurred to me that, even though it sounds more intellectual, the analysis of the emotion and so on, actually Tibetans go down to the floor so many times. Do you want to say something about that? Because it is the body being involved in...
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's a very strong connection or relationship between our mind and the body. It's pretty clear. Yeah. Also, we see the breathing pattern is very much influenced with how our emotional state is. Yeah, you see that even in operations in hospitals, that the surgeon checks if the person is ready. If there's too much anxiety, then there will be too much blood loss, for example. So they decide not to operate at that time. Yeah. So that means there is a very strong connection with the physical and the material, so to say, and what we call consciousness of the mind. Yeah. And then from the point of view of emotions, same thing. Yeah, people with high levels of narcissistic approaches or anger, it has an influence. You can see high blood pressure, inclination to heart disease. It's very clear. Yeah, and mental, people with more narcissistic aspects, more aspects of mental issues as well. Yeah? So that's in general what we see. That of course, nothing exists independently. Everything is dependent, right? So the mind and the body. And then with regards to what you mentioned, purification practices or transforming the mind, of course, some kind of physical exercise can help. I personally, before I entered Buddhism, I was into Chinese medicine because I was into martial arts when I was a university student in the Netherlands, studying hydrology, and then in my free time, I slowly start to stop going to parties and find more interest in the spiritual aspect of life, so to say. That started with Chinese medicine, and there we see the same thing, that by doing physical exercises like Tai Chi or yoga or whatsoever, it builds a kind of awareness. People become more aware of their body, and if you become more aware of your body, you become more aware of your mind. And you see the same thing in schools. For example, in the UK, I saw very interesting research of children who engage in yoga, a very universal, secular aspect of exercise. And then they say, oh, actually, I feel more calm. Actually, I can concentrate much better. It's very, so that you can see there's a correlation also how we physically act. And we know that, even in the brain, neuroplasticity is a relation, is a reality. And you can accomplish change in the brain by meditation, but you can also accomplish it through physical exercise. Yeah, and that's also true with mind trainings, and become more aware, and especially what you mentioned, the purification aspect. Because if you purify negative habituation patterns, it helps to transform, right? Yeah. So everything is connected, right? Yeah.
So does that mean, like, if you're in a state where your mind is so chaotic, you've almost got no sense of self, like it's quite extreme, that it might be better to work, to do it at a more crude level with the body, if meditation is not an option in that moment, would that possibly be?
I think so. I mean, meditation is not easy, right? Yeah. If you have people who have to train their mind and who are struggling with things, it's much better initially to engage in the form of sports or yoga or Tai Chi to get to the first level. Meditation, if you just sit down and your mind goes all over the place, then there's no point in pushing you on the cushion and to sit, right? So that's what I saw when I did a lot of Tai Chi and physical aspects. It helps a lot to subdue your mind, to become more aware of things, and then later on you can engage in meditation practices, right? Yeah. And you can see people who would deal with mental difficulties or depression, that initially to have social activities, to do physical exercise, is a starting point, right? So that means that we see also the change in the brain, you can accomplish it by meditation, but you can also accomplish it by social activities and physical exercise. That's very clear. So that's for initially, I think, for people who are wanting to transform the mind, but it's still a bit challenging, then that's the first step. To engage to the angle of physical exercise, to build up this awareness is the first step, right? And because that awareness is there, then you start to be able to understand the mind better, and then the next step can be meditation, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I have another question, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay. The self that doesn't exist and the self
Okay,
that does exist.
Yeah,
I've got you. Sorry, I'm still back there.
Yeah.
The origin of love
Yeah.
and the concept of love in
Yeah.
Buddhism, where is that from?
Yeah.
And what is the nature of it in Buddhism?
Okay. So we talk about mind and mental factors. Yeah? So anger and attachment are mental factors. And we call them destructive emotions, or technically we call them non-virtuous mental factors. Yeah? They non-virtuous, why? Because they produce suffering. Yeah? So that's one aspect of the mind. Yeah? And then compassion and love and kindness, for example, are positive mental factors, or virtuous mental factors that produce happiness. And you can see that if you, for example, have an act of anger, or you're really irritated, it disturbs the mind, you lose a peace of mind. If you practice kindness, yeah, if you're a religious person, or believer, or non-believer, you just practice kindness. You just every day try to do at least one act of kindness. It gives satisfaction in the mind. Right? So that means love and kindness, or kindness in general, produces a result, which is happiness, or satisfaction, or gratitude, or whatsoever. Right? So that means it's a positive result. So we have both in our mind. We have potentials for anger, and we have potentials for love and kindness. The thing is that we can transform the mind, and through the power of habituating patterns, we can habituate ourselves more to the positive aspects, like love and kindness, rather than the destructive ones, like anger. So that means every human being has love and kindness and compassion. But for some it's more manifest, for others it's more dormant. Even animals, you see exactly the same thing. And so that means that's an innate aspect of love and kindness and compassion in each of us. But for some it's more developed, for others it's less. Or some it's more manifest, for others is more dormant. So that means we all have those qualities, but it's just a matter of fact of activating it or habituating yourself to that. So that means if you, and another aspect is the stronger the ego is, the less compassionate you will become because you think only about yourself. Right? So that's a very important aspect of the Buddhist doctrine as well, to try to reduce the egoistic approach in order to enhance love and kindness and compassion for others. Right? So that's kind of a very important aspect, but Buddhists or non-Buddhists, we all have the same minds, right? And we all have the same mental factors, and they have the same emotions. That's uniform. Every religion talks about similar aspects of the mind. But the clue is to enhance these positive states of mind, and to transform these negative ones into the positive ones. And then we can, over time, it's just a matter of fact of habituation patterns. And that we see in various types of practitioners over a long period of time, they can even have compassion and love and kindness for the enemy who are torturing them. And that's very impressive. So the capacity of the mind is very interesting. You know, that potential, I said in the previous session, we have this limitless potential in the mind. It's just a matter of fact of activating it and putting effort in that direction. Yeah. Yeah.
So just so I'm clear,
Yeah.
the origin of love, therefore, is the mind in the self that exists, not the self that doesn't exist. Yeah?
The origin of the mind?
The origin of the mind. No, the origin of love
Yeah. Yeah.
and kindness.
Yeah.
You put the two together, is the mind, therefore,
Yes.
in Buddhism. Okay.
Yeah, because the origin means we all have minds, so we all have mental factors as well, and we all have one of those mental factors is compassion, love, and kindness, right? So we all have those states of mind, you know. So we just have to activate them. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Geshe Tenzin. Namdak, and Venerable Kalchok for being with us. I think it's been a riveting presentation, and it's enlightening, I think, irrespective of our faith and belief, tips of things that we can each benefit from. So it's very much in the spirit of our interfaith activities this week. So thank you very much. And also thank you for allowing us to record the session and for allowing us to share it within the trust. For those who may wish to kind of reflect on it again, watch it again, or those who may not have been able to join us so that they can use it as a resource. So thank you very much for that. And I would like you to also convey our regards to the Jamyang Buddhist Center, and we appreciate the work that you do. So I would now like to invite Dr. Asif Iqbal, who is the chair of our interfaith network here in the Trust, to just give us some closing remarks briefly. Dr. Asif.
Thank you, Reverend Alfred. I have got the mundane task of closing this event. First of all, I just want to say a few words. Thank you very much, Geshe Tenzin Namde. I hope I pronounced your name correctly, for your enlightening presentation. We really appreciate of the fact that you and your colleagues have devoted time and visited us here. And then we are also grateful for your contribution and your kind gifts to us. And then your insight was really invaluable to us. Just about a few figures which I wanted to mention with regard to the demographics within the hospital workforce. So about 2.67% of the workforce affiliate themselves with the Buddhist faith. That's translated about I think 350 member of staff. And I think if my memory serves right, there were about 8 patients referrals for Buddhist faith, I think. Last year. Yeah. Okay. So just to give you an idea that that's the demographics of the workforce and also the patient staff here. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Asif Iqbal. I work in radiology. I'm also the chair of the Faith and Belief Network. I work very closely with my friend Reverend Alfred Pania and my friend Reverend Carl Karpani. We've created this network last September it was launched, and the idea is that we want to create an inclusive environment. Faith is a fundamental part of our identity, and I think we believe that members of staff should feel, without the fear of judgment, able to express their faith and their beliefs, or no belief. Okay? So that's one of the reasons that we have created this network. This event was part of the Interfaith and Week event, and I'm sure there will be more events coming, and your contribution will be invaluable to that. Anything I am missing? Yes, I've been told that there are 21 people online at the moment. So please, if you have not signed up, and if you haven't become a member, membership is free. So there's a QR code on the web, so please sign up for that, so that you can also get information about other events and other activities. The whole purpose of the network is to provide the resources and the guidance and the expertise to all the member staff, whether to organize an event, or whether they need some referrals, or whether they need just a safe space where they want to talk to us in confidence about anything, about their belief or any struggles they are having. We are now into post-COVID, and there was this increased number of faith referrals around the COVID period. So we hope that that trend is going to continue. and yourself and other faith leaders play a significant, important role in that. Okay. So with that, I would like to thank you and close this one.